Hi everybody, welcome back to Main Mission Hope, and I'm really aware that I did a beginner's guide to get started with the Bible for new Christians, and it was way too long, so I wanted to do a really short version of it, which hopefully this will be. So if you're new to Christianity, and or you haven't touched a Bible before and you're a little bit intimidated about where to start, that's what this is all about. So this is the Holy Bible. It's the Catholic edition, which means that it has 73 books in rather than 66 for a Protestant version. That only applies to the Old Testament though. So there's more books in the Old Testament in the Catholic Bible. Doesn't really matter if you're a new Christian and you haven't decided a denomination yet, then maybe the Catholic edition is one to go for. But it doesn't matter that much because the New Testament is the same, and you're going to end up with loads of Bibles over the years as well. This is the NRSV version. The ESV is another good version as well. There's lots of good versions, but basically the NRSV is a little bit more easier to read in terms of the way that they try to translate it is meaningful words. So they'll look at a sentence in the old scriptures and they'll try and translate the meaning, whereas the ESV is a little bit more literal. If I had a ESV softback that I could take with me, then I would probably use ESV. That's one I would probably recommend, but whichever Bible you've got is good. So when you get your Bible anyway, one of the things you want to start off with is the introduction. And just really getting to know where things are. And you might think, well, that's a bit obvious, isn't it? But often people miss the fact that there's things like in the beginning of this one, there's the preface, and it's worth reading that as well, because often it's from the people who translated the Bible, or this particular version, they can tell you what they're going for. And then we've got church history and world history together. It's really cool, isn't it, to read through. And then you also have maps. So these are excellent, so you can come back and you can refer to these maps as you're reading, so you get a better idea of the geography of what's going on. And then also, what I really like in this book as well, is it has introductions to the books of the Bible. What they're about, who may well have written them, and why. Because the important thing to remember about when you're reading the Bible is that it is an entire document. And that sounds a bit obvious, doesn't it? But remember, the Bible started off as different scrolls and letters, and then it's been brought together in one book. Aren't we so lucky for that? But the idea is that the Old Testament and the New Testament are linked together. Things that are written in the New Testament are shadowing what's happened in the Old Testament, and lots of the stuff in the Old Testament is foreshadowing what will be in the New Testament, so they are linked. Now, both parts of the Bible are important in their own way. So, for example, the Old Testament, as a record of the Hebrews and the Israelites and what they got up to spiritually and historically, is, and the creation of the universe, just that small thing, is really important in and of its own. The Old Testament, stands on its own two legs, if you like, as well. But there's so much in there that is foretelling what is to come in the New Testament with Jesus. I mean, a quick example would be something like Moses leading the Israelites through the wilderness to the Promised Land. Think about how that relates to Jesus and the salvation and stuff like that. So, but you're thinking, oh my gosh, so I've got to do that. But what I would always say is start with the New Testament. So if we see where the New Testament starts here. There we go. So there's the New Testament. So look at that. That's how thick the New Testament is, or how thin it is. Look how thick the Old Testament is. It's all that. So as a new Christian, start with the New Testament. This is the Gospels. This is the story of Jesus, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And if you were to say, well, which Gospel should I start to? Of course, you could just read them in the order they're in the book, but maybe you could maybe think about starting with John. Basically, because John starts with, is this the most amazing few paragraphs ever written by human beings? In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God, and the Word was with God. He was in the beginning with God. All things came into being through him, and without him not one thing came into being. What has come into being in him was life, and the life was the light of all people. The light that shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not overcome it. Oh, wow, fantastic. So maybe start with John, but they're so short that you can just read them in order. So you have the Gospels to work through. And then you'll have Acts, which is the continuing story of what the apostles get up to after Jesus has gone back up to heaven, after the ascension. And then you have the epistles, which are the letters of Paul and various other people as well, to various churches around the Christian world, basically telling them what to do and how to be good Christians, and telling them off in some cases and congratulating them in the other. And then you finish with Revelations, which is like a prophecy by John. So you can see it's fairly short. It's nice and short. And then, dive into the Old Testament. Now, the Old Testament kind of, it lulls you into a false sense of security with Genesis and the beginning of Exodus, because you've got these great stories. And then you have certain bits of it that are a bit of a slug, I won't lie. So you have things like Numbers, which is lots of rules and how to build things and how to build like the tabernacle and stuff like that. But remember, the idea, the truth is that the Bible was written by men, inspired by God. So the people who wrote the Bible was man and God, 100% man, 100% God. And we should view it as a whole. So we read the New Testament in light of the Old, and we read the Old Testament in light of the New. And although I am holding a print Bible here, and I highly recommend getting a print Bible, even if it isn't what you read all the time. Maybe you read like the ESV version like I do, and the Blue Letter Bible app, which is free. There is something undeniably powerful about being able to flick through a paper Bible and run your finger along the words that have been inspired by God. I think that's just amazing. And very, very, very powerful indeed. So don't get intimidated by the Bible. Start with the introduction. See what resources are in the Bible, sometimes at the front, sometimes at the back, in terms of introductions and guides and maps. And start with the New Testament, and then go into the Old Testament. In fact, I tell you what, I would probably say, if you're a new Christian, I would start by watching The Chosen. Watch The Chosen TV series, then start reading the New Testament, and then move on to the Old. Anyway, hopefully you found this is useful, and hope you found this a bit quicker than my other video. And of course, I'll see you all again soon. Thank you very much.